terrifying than that, though, this woman is floating off the ground. They're both looking, and her feet are nowhere near the pavement. And she's slowly floating across the road towards them, screaming.
So, once again, you found yourself at the campsite of the Orator. Well, please pull up a chair. As you can see, my fire is stoked, which means tonight I have another tale to tell. But before we begin, if you find yourself enjoying this kind of content, first-hand accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, then allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, and it allows me to continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. Second, all of my stories are first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So if you or anybody you know has a story that might fit well on my channel, either reach out in the comments below or on any of my social media. We will find a time to get together, collect your story, and hopefully feature it one day here on The Orator. And lastly, in the month of June, I was running a contest. I am going to be extending that contest all the way through the month of July. Here's how this contest works. I have 7 custom-made Orator trading cards. Each one of them is unique and individual. They were each uniquely and individually burned in the Orator's campfire. So every single card is a little bit different based off of its burn marks. It was created by a company called Jack's Attic. They do horror pop weirdness. They do a ton of different stuff. Go check out their website. I'll make sure to link it below. But one of the things they specialize in is horror trading cards. And so these cards are excellent quality and they're numbered. And all you have to do to potentially win one is comment on my videos in the months of June and now July. Every single time you comment on a new video, you're going to get put in a hat, and I'm going to draw 7 names at the end, and if you're one of those 7 names, then you get a custom trading card, along with a letter that I'm going to write and sign, and my 7-year-old daughter wants to also include a scary picture, and she's starting to get into art, so you're going to get all of that. And so a couple quick rules apply. You can't comment more than once on a video and get multiple entries, but you can comment on multiple videos and get multiple entries. So make sure to go all the way back to the very beginning of June, watch each one of my videos, and make sure to comment on every single one of them to up your chances to win. And now, with all of that out of the way, let's get on to today's tale. It is a story I call Llorona. So, it is the mid-90s, and Jay is 11 years old. Him, his younger brother, his mom, and his dad live in a little trailer in El Paso, Texas. Now, El Paso, it butts right up against Mexico. It's right on the American-Mexican border. And so because of that, a lot of people who emigrate from Mexico into the United States settle in Texas in places like El Paso. So Jay and his family, they're originally from Mexico. They've been in the United States for a long time, but they still have a lot of Mexican heritage and history and those kinds of things in place. And so does their surrounding community. And so Jay, and his family, they've been living here in El Paso for Jay's entire life, and everything has been completely normal throughout his entire life until it's one random night in the middle of the summer. Jay's younger brother's actually staying the night over at his aunt's, so it's just Jay and his parents, and it's late at night, and they're watching Jay Leno. Jay Leno was a really popular talk show host in the late 90s, and he hosted late night shows. And so they're up late, and they're watching that, and at some point, Jay falls asleep on the couch. And his parents end up just kind of getting up and going to bed and leaving him there because this is a pretty common practice. And somewhere in the middle of the night, Jay wakes up. And right away, he can tell that something has woken him up. He has not woken up naturally. Something brought him out of sleep. And so he wakes up on the couch, and he kind of knows what's going on because he falls asleep on the couch watching TV a lot. And so he rubs his eyes, and he looks from the living room into the kitchen, and in the kitchen is his microwave, and he can see the timer on the microwave, and it says that it's 4 o'clock in the morning. And so he knows it's really, really late in the morning. He's wondering why he's been woken up from his sleep when all of a sudden he doesn't have to wonder anymore because he hears outside the sound of this woman screaming, just wailing her guts out like something devastating or tragic has happened. and all of a sudden he goes from being sleepy and having sleep in his eyes to being completely alert and awake, and his adrenaline is going crazy, and he's just like running through his head. Am I dreaming? Is this a dream? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, this screaming, it's getting louder and it's getting closer. And there's something weird about it. Jay is talking about how the fact that it's outside, but it sounds kind of like he's in a hallway with this woman and she's screaming. It's kind of like tunneled and echoed, and he can hear it so loud in his ears. And it's starting to get closer, and he's wondering, maybe this really is a dream, when all of a sudden, outside, his animals, they have dogs and cats, they start going crazy. They're meowing and barking, they're running all over the place, and it's 4 in the morning. I mean, everybody is asleep. It's completely dark outside. And so Jay, he walks up to the window, and he puts his hand against the glass, and he's squinting out, but it's just so dark outside, he can't see anything. Meanwhile, this screaming is getting closer. And now, instead of just normal screaming and noise, he starts to be able to make out words. And he swears he can hear this woman screaming. And right away, he knows the translation of that. It means, oh, my children. And all of a sudden, he goes from scared to terrified. Because all of a sudden, those words make him remember a story that his mom told him to scare him when he was younger. The story of Ya Llorona. Now, Ya Llorona is one of these ancient myths. It's been around since literally the 1500s in Mexico. This is a really, really, really old story. There are a ton of different iterations and versions of it. The most common of which is that there was a woman and her husband was unfaithful to her. He cheated on her. And when she found out about this betrayal, she was so completely devastated that she murdered her children by drowning them. And then she killed herself. And now her spirit, tormented by all of this tragedy, wanders around Mexico and the southern parts of the United States and finds and lures children. Now, there's a bunch of different stuff that can happen. She is said to either be an omen of misfortune or the cause of misfortune. So people who hear or see Ya Llorona, they either have everything in their lives go bad, and some people think that she's just a warning to let them know what's going to happen, or she might be the cause. In some stories, she even portends or brings about death. And so, everybody from Mexico and everybody who's heard these stories and stuff like that, they take this extremely seriously. It's really, really scary. It's something everybody, tells their children as scary bedtime stories. And so right away, Jay hears this, and he just knows all of a sudden, like, oh my God, is this a real encounter? And in his head, he's like, am I going crazy? Can this possibly be real? And then he kind of grounds himself, and he reminds himself that these dogs and cats and stuff like that outside, they're going crazy for something. And so he runs into the kitchen, he flips on the light, his heart's pounding, he's freaking out. This voice is getting closer and closer and louder, and finally, Jay can't take it anymore. He runs into his parents' bedroom, and he shakes his mom awake, and he's like, Mom, Mom, Mom. And she finally, after a minute, starts to kind of gain her bearings and starts to wake up. And as she's waking up, Jay can hear this voice fading and getting quieter and quieter. And finally, his mom comes awake. He's like, Mom, listen, listen. And she's listening, and it's completely silent. Now he's like, did you hear it? Did you hear that woman screaming? And she's, of course, tired. She's like, Jay, go to bed. You woke me up. There's nothing out there. She listens for a second. It's completely quiet. She's like, cut it out. Go to bed. And so finally, after a while, he wanders back out to the living room. He turns on all of the lights. He turns on the TV, and he just does not go to sleep again all the way until it's morning and light out, and then finally he drags himself to bed and he falls asleep. And the next day he gets up, and he's trying to tell everybody about this, right? Mom and Dad, his brother when he gets home, his aunt and his aunt's daughter, so his cousin. I mean, like anybody in his family who will listen, he's trying to tell them the story of Ya Llorona and how he heard her and how the animals were freaking out. And nobody believes him. And so after a while, he just gets discouraged and decides, never mind, I'm just going to shut up about this, even though he knows what he heard and what he saw. So we're going to fast forward a year. His Aunt Cindy, who he tried to tell about Ya Llorona, she's in her mid-40s, and she has a daughter who's like 18, 19 years old and is about to go to college, and they live together not too far from Jay's house. And it is all of a sudden the middle of the night, and Jay's Aunt Cindy, she gets woken up in the middle of the night. And right away, she knows what woke her up because she can hear this screaming coming from outside. And she said it's just this gut-wrenching wail. Like whoever is screaming must have lost everything. Like devastated. And so right away, Aunt Cindy thinks someone is in trouble or maybe they got hurt. Like she's literally thinking maybe somebody got hit by a car and they're laying out in the ditch beside her house right now screaming for help. And so she wakes up and she's not thinking anything supernatural. She gets the sleep out of her eyes and she's flipping lights on in the house and everything like that. And as she's getting ready to go outside and figure out what's going on, her daughter also wakes up and comes out in the living room and they're kind of discussing this wailing coming from outside, and they both agree. Whoever this is, they're in serious trouble and they need help. And so they get flashlights and they wander outside. Remember, it's the middle of the night. It's like 2:30 a.m. It's very, very dark outside. And basically you exit their house, there's their big yard, and then you hit the road, and on the other side of the road there's this ditch with a bunch of water in it. And so that's where they're thinking that crying is coming from. And so they're slowly making their way out, and they're almost near the road, and they're hearing this crying, when all of a sudden they're looking, they don't see anything. They see this woman start to emerge from the other side of the ditch. And there are a few things right away that are alarming. Number one, this woman is extremely pale. She has a full, beautiful white gown on. She has long, straight black hair that's flowing around her. But the two things that are terrifying to both Cindy and her daughter. Number one, even though they have these lights trained right on this woman, they can't make out her face. It's like there's like this shadow over her face, and even if they shine the light right on it, they can't quite make out what her face looks like. And it's just this really bizarre thing that they've just never experienced before. But even more terrifying than that, because, obviously it's late and it's hard to see and they're tired and everything like that. More terrifying than that, though, this woman is floating off the ground. They're both looking, and her feet are nowhere near the pavement. And she's slowly floating across the road towards them, screaming for her life. Like it's the worst thing that ever happened. And Cindy and her daughter, they turn to each other, they look at each other, and then they just turn around and run inside the house. And they slam the door, they lock up all the doors, they close all the blinds on the window. Cindy runs over, grabs her phone, dials 911, and is like, you need to come over here right now. There's somebody coming after me and my family. So 911, the police, they show up a couple minutes later, and this whole time, this woman is wailing outside. They can hear her screaming. And so all of a sudden they start to hear police sirens in the distance, and they see these cars come flying up. And as the police are getting closer and the siren sound is getting louder, Llorona is getting quieter and quieter, and suddenly that voice is completely faded away. The police show up, and Cindy and her daughter, they come out and they explain what it is that they saw, and they say, we know it sounds crazy, but she's out here, there's somebody out here, she was coming after us, it was terrifying. And so of course the police, they do their due diligence. They search all around the house, they search the road, they search the ditch, and they just come and they talk to Cindy and they say, listen, if somebody came out of the ditch, that ditch is full of water, there'd be water on the road, or there'd be footprints somewhere, or there would be some evidence of somebody. There's literally nothing. I don't know what you guys saw, but there's nothing out here anywhere. And, there's this road, and there's this ditch, and then it's all, like, farmland and stuff around. There's nowhere for a person to even really hide or anything like that. I'm sorry, but we just don't see what we can do here. And so, they eventually do leave, and Cindy and her daughter, they end up staying up all night together, and they're talking about what they saw. And the next day, Jay actually happens to come over, and the moment he sees Cindy's daughter, they're pretty close, he could tell something's wrong because she's extremely tired, she's got bags under her eyes, she's clearly terrified by something. And so he sits down and he talks to her, and they basically exchange their encounters and realize that neither one of them is lying. They have now both encountered Llorona. So now we fast forward to the early 2000s. Jay, he's about 18 years old, and he has his first job. He works at a supermarket called the Big 8, and he actually works the overnight shift. So he goes in at 3 a.m., and he gets out at 12 p.m. And it's him and two other guys, and basically they're like the night crew. They clean up the entire store, they restock everything for the next morning, and they generally just get ready for the store to open and then kind of guide it through its first few opening hours. And so Jay right now is currently working on the dairy section. He's basically taking these crates of milk, He's wheeling them out to the section where the customers would buy it from. He's stocking those aisles with milk, and then he's taking the empty crates outside, out back, and he puts them in basically like this outside service area, and then eventually the milk truck will pull up and take those crates and go refill them and bring them back. And so he's kind of in that process where he's dropping off the milk and then taking the crates outside. And in one of his trips outside, one of the guys he works with, a guy named Ryan, closes that back service door and locks it on him. And so Jay is locked outside of the store. And he could go around and go up front, but basically all of the other doors are locked. This was his way in and out. And he's not freaking out or anything because him and Ryan and the other guy, they always mess with each other and stuff like that. So he knows that he's getting pranked. And so he kind of just decides, you know what? I don't have to work. Maybe I'll just call this a break and I'll sit out here. And eventually he'll stop laughing inside and think it's not funny anymore. And he'll eventually open the back door, let me in, and we'll be done. And so Jay, he's just kind of chilling out there, enjoying the fact that he doesn't have to work and he's getting paid for it, when all of a sudden, from off in the distance, out beyond where he can see or anything like that, he hears that gut-wrenching cry again. And he remembers that off, way out beyond this field that kind of overlooks the area that they're working at is this deep ditch with water. And one of the things with Llorona is she's known for drowning her children and drowning victims and stuff like that. And so it's always said that she's by a body of water. And so he's thinking, he remembers back to when he was 11 years old. He remembers that cry, and it is the exact same sound, and it's the same concept. It's like they're out in this massive, expansive space, and somehow it still feels like him and this woman are in a hallway, and it's echoing. It's like it is directed right at him. And so he goes from just kind of relaxing outside to complete panic immediately, because he knows exactly what this is. And so he turns and he starts pounding on the door, and he's screaming at Ryan to let him in. Please let me in, let me in. And Ryan, of course, is on the other side, and he thinks he's finally pulled this prank on Jay, and he's got him. And so he's just laughing, and he thinks it's hilarious. And meanwhile, Jay is out there pounding on the door, screaming to be let in, and he's hearing this voice get closer and closer and closer until he knows she's got to be right behind him. And he's so scared of what's going on, he won't look. He won't turn around and look. He's just got his eyes closed, and he's screaming, I'm in trouble. This isn't a joke. And finally, Ryan opens the door. And as soon as he opens the door, he's laughing, and his face goes from laughing to panicked right away. And he just says, what the hell is that? And as he's screaming, he's grabbing Jay and pulling him inside the store, and he slams the door closed. And all of a sudden, he's terrified. He's freaking out. And he's just yelling at Jay like, what was that? What happened? Oh, my God, I'm sorry. And, Jay, he's freaking out. And he's trying to calm down. He's getting his breathing under control. And then at some point, they both calm down enough for Jay to explain. He says, listen, I know this is going to sound crazy, but, this is what happened when I was 11 years old. This happened to my aunt and my cousin, and, this is not the first time I've experienced Llorona. And he's explaining this to Jay, and Jay's taking it in, and he just saw this creature, and he's explaining to Jay what he saw, and it's basically what him, Jay's aunt and cousin saw. He said, a woman with long hair, and she had this white dress on. He said, but what was crazy is she was right up on me, and I still couldn't exactly make out what she looked like. And so they're discussing this. At some point, Ryan says, this is like your third incident around this myth, this folklore. Do you think that she could be after you? Like something bad is going to happen? And it was really the first time that Jay had considered this, and it truly terrified him to know that she is supposed to be an omen for either death or misfortune, and she has been following him throughout her entire life. And so he's kind of struggling with that. And over the next couple of years, he's really worried about it, but he doesn't see anything with Llorona. And at some point, Jay leaves the supermarket, and he gets a different job as a custodian at a place called Cedar Grove Elementary. So he's at an elementary school. Now, this elementary school, Cedar Grove, it's still in El Paso, Texas, but it's actually butted right up against the Rio Grande River, and then right on the other side of the Rio Grande River is the Border Patrol fence that separates America from Mexico. So he's literally right butted up against the border while he's working at it. And his normal shift, it only goes till 11 p.m., and he works with one other guy, a guy named Craig. And for some reason, the school ended up being a lot crazier and messier this night than it normally was. And so instead of stopping at 11, they actually went all the way until midnight this night. And they're kind of going through and they're cleaning everything up. And then they do one final sweep through and make sure everything's good and good. It's about midnight. They're a little bit late, but that's okay. Everything's good and they're ready to close. So they close everything up. They go outside to their car. And Craig gets in his truck to go start it up. And as he goes to roll it over, it doesn't really roll over. And he's like, he realizes he's left the lights on in his vehicle. And so he turns, he says, hey, do you happen to have jumper cables, Jay? And Jay says, yeah, of course. And he goes to his trunk and he grabs them and he pulls them out. And they're getting ready to jump Craig's car when all of a sudden, from all the way off by the Rio Grande, they both hear this screaming, this wailing woman. And right away, Jay turns to Craig and he says, listen, I know you're not going to believe this. And Craig, he's freaked out. And he turns to Jay and says, what? Like, is this like a demon or something? What is this? And, they can already both hear not just the screaming, but the overall supernatural element of it. The Rio Grande is, a really long ways away. It's a really giant river. They should not be able to hear a woman screaming from this far off. But it's like, again, almost like a tunnel. It's like they can hear it so clearly. And so Jay, explains to Craig, Llorona, how he's seen her all these years. And Craig, it's like, he doesn't even think twice. He believes Jay right away. Says, we need to get out of here. And so they hook up the jumper cables, and eventually Craig's vehicle starts, and they're just getting ready to get in their respective vehicles and take off when Border Patrol comes flying up to their area, slams on the brake and parks, and the Border Patrol guys get out and they start running over to the river as though they're also hearing it and trying to figure out what's going on. And Jay thinks to himself, I actually have authority figures here. I'm going to finally record this and get this on tape so that people can see that I've been experiencing this. And so he whips out his phone and he hits record and he starts running over to the area where he'd be able to go down to the Rio Grande. And as he hits record and starts running over, he hears Llorona, that voice, that screaming voice, dying down. And then all of a sudden it stops and he's like, he goes and he hits play again. He tries to listen, and all he can hear is the roaring of the Rio Grande and the nightlife and stuff like that. And there's no screaming at all on his recording. But the Border Patrol people, they're out there looking around, and obviously Craig also heard it. And so they're kind of discussing stuff for a little bit. And at some point, Jay just has to say, "This is just something that's happened to me throughout my life, and you at least got to experience it with me, so I'm not crazy, but hopefully, this is a thing that doesn't continue to happen in my life because it's truly terrifying." And of course, the next day, Craig, he's telling everybody about it, and everybody's asking Jay, and he said he's happy to, tell his story, but he still, to this day, is worried about one night when he wakes up late at night near some water and hears this wailing woman again, the wailing of Llorona. And so that's going to do it for today's tale. If you enjoyed this story or any of my others, please help support me by allowing the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, and it allows me to continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. Second, all of my stories are, of course, first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So if you or anybody you know has a story that might fit well on my channel, please either reach out in the comments below or on any of my social media. We'll find a time to get together, collect your story, and hopefully feature it one day here on The Orator. And lastly, my trading card contest has been extended through the entire month of July. Make sure to go comment on any of my June or July videos to increase your chances to win a custom Orator trading card. And so until next time, where you'll pull up your chair, my fire will be stoked, and I will have another tale to tell.